Enneagram. My name is Jason Miller. I'm a husband, father, pastor, Enneagram enthusiast, and Type 7. I'm here with three of my really good friends who are not only amazing people, they're colleagues and they're part of our Worship Creative Arts department. And we're going to be talking about what it looks like to be their type in the midst of the coronavirus crisis, working together as a team and everything else. Hey, why don't you guys introduce yourself, and then we're going to get going.
Sure. Ben Trady, Worship and Creative Arts pastor.
I'm John Hopple. I'm the music director.
And I am Stacy Lamore, and I'm the production
Stacy's over there in our producer booth, and so you're going to see a camera switching back. Real quickly, why don't you say what your type is? And then I'd love to hear a little bit about what it's like to be a team in the midst of everything going on.
Sure. So my Enneagram type, I'm a Type 3. We all work together. Stacy and John are under me here, and well, I'll let you guys. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
I'm a Type 9. Yeah, and it's been quite a hectic change from our regularly scheduled programming.
Yeah, this has been a really crazy time for you guys, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Stacy, how about you?
I am a Type 1.
Type 1. Now, the three types, so Ben, the Type 3 is often called the performer or the achiever. John, the Type 9, sometimes called the peacemaker. Type 1, we actually had a one on last week, my good friend Jenna Los, who shared. And ones can sometimes called be perfectionists. They also can be seen as achievers or reformers. And one of the things that I want to do today is we're going to be talking about team dynamics and what it's like working with one another and how to bring out the best. In this time, and this is part of what we're doing in the Everyday Enneagram, is the Enneagram is something that can help us understand ourselves better, but more importantly, how to work with others better. Because the more that I understand how somebody else operates, not only can I have compassion on them, but I can meet them where they're at. Because part of the problem is so often we assume that everybody thinks like we do.
Yeah.
So you guys, when all this broke out, we had about a month ago now. I think we've been a month.
I think so.
A month? About a month ago, we went from, hey, we're going to do service as a church, and they do worship, they do our video production, and it was like we had like 4 days notice. Yeah. So now, Ben, as a 3, part of what the 3 longs for is image management. Tell me a little bit about what went through your head in the midst of that. I mean, here you are, you have this crunch time. How did that feed you, and then how did you pull together the team?
So what's really interesting, I was thinking about this morning because for me, yeah, there's a thing about image management, but I'm a 1-to-1 3, so my subtype is 1-to-1, and the difference for me is my success is in your success.
Yeah.
And so if I'm going to be seen as successful and able to overcome failure, it's because I have helped other people become successful and overcome failure. And so I was trying to think of how to put it, because for me, I don't mind the pressure.
Yeah.
That's the norm. Like last week when you were talking to Jenna, she was saying like her inner critique is what she constantly holds herself to.
Yeah.
And then so for me, I don't know, kind of like Maui. I'm only as good as my last from Moana.
Oh, Maui. I'm like, Maui, the island?
No,
okay.
If I just lean into my personality, my tendency is to say that I'm only as valuable as my last accomplishment.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden I get the call from Doc, hey, this is what we're going to do. It's going to look like this now. I don't mind the pressure. I like the pressure.
Yeah.
In fact, the thing is like, I don't know, if like a 7 is going to be seen as like maybe an adrenaline jockey, right? Like where they're going for that next big
They love
thing.
the experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You push that to the extreme, right? It's just like let's jump out of airplanes type of thing. For me, it's one of those where the only way to make the success bigger is like high risk, high reward type of thing.
Yeah.
So something like this where you end up you have to flip the entire paradigm of what church is on a Sunday morning like this. yeah, it was insanely stressful, but it's also, for me, insanely exhilarating.
Yeah.
Like, I really enjoy it.
So I want to stop for a second because not everybody might be aware of what a subtype is.
Sure. There are actually 27 types.
Yeah. So here's one of the things that's helpful with the Enneagram. Often I'll hear things like, because other personality tests, Myers-Briggs, Strength Finders, these are all wonderful tools. In fact, the Enneagram is just another tool to have in your tool belt, so to speak, right? One of the first kind of pushbacks that I'll get from people is they're like, are you telling me there's only 9 personality types? And no. In fact, there are 9 archetypes, meaning these are kind of the core types. And then the subtype, you have 3 subtypes that fit underneath that. And those subtypes basically are kind of instinctual. They're things that are driving you. And what that allows for is I could have 100 different 3s or 9s or 1s, and none of them are going to look the same.
Yeah.
They're not going to talk the same. They're going to have their distinct people. And the subtype kind of drives. So you're what's called a 1-to-1 one or a sexual 1. And the idea behind a sexual 3 or a 1-to-1 3 is that what they want to be seen is they want to be seen as the pinnacle of what it looks like to be masculine or feminine, depending on how they see themselves. And so they want to be the epitome of what you think it looks like to be an accomplished man.
Yeah.
Right? And so how they dress, how they talk, how they produce, everything kind of flows in that, is that they want to be seen as if every other man should look at them and go, that's what I want to strive for, right? And interestingly, when a 3 is in a good place, when a 3 feels secure, they go to the 6. And what the 6 does is the 6 is they begin to recognize that they're not in this alone. Because that's always one of the struggles for the 3, is to feel like they have to do it.
Yeah, one of the things that's actually been, incredibly liberating about like my whole Enneagram thing is reading So I read The Road Back to You first, and reading that, and first of all, it's horrible. You read
Not the book.
No.
The book is great.
No, the book is. That's the thing, is the book is so well written. You're reading it and you're like, oh my gosh, somebody knows me.
Yeah.
And these are all the things that I don't tell anyone. But what was nice about it, on the same side when it was like super scary, is also other people think this way.
Yeah.
There are other people that go through the mental gymnastics that I do just when I'm deciding what to wear for everyday Enneagram. You know?
Honestly, when I was looking through my wardrobe this morning, I was just trying to find things that my buttons weren't screaming for mercy. That's what I was.
You were trying to keep it quarantine.
I was trying to keep it quarantine. I've got the COVID-19 right now. So now, Ben, you also work with John and Stacy. John, tell me a little bit what it's like to be a 9, and you're a self-preservation 9, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And interestingly, is the 3 actually goes to the 9 in stress. And so there might be some mirroring that can take place at times where Ben might see himself in you and you see yourself in him, because when you go to security, you actually go to the 3.
Yeah, that's right.
So share a little bit about what it's like to be a 9, how this has kind of impacted you. What was kind of your response as an Enneagram Type 9, often called the peacemaker?
Yeah, sure. It's funny, when this whole coronavirus situation came about, I looked at everything that was going on. You know, a lot of cities are quarantining. A lot of states are saying, no, you can't meet groups larger than 10, social distancing, 6 feet apart. You know, basically stay where you're at, stay in your homes, just don't go out unless you absolutely have to. And I'm like, cool. So nothing changes. All right. A lot of it has been, at least for my personal life, it's just been a lot of the same. And I'm like, oh, well, all right, cool with this. Now I have an excuse not to leave the house. And in terms of the changes in how we do stuff at Zion, I'd like to think of myself as very flexible. Just being a Type 9 is being able to see a lot of different viewpoints and kind of adapt and process them and go, okay, well, we all seem to agree here. What can we do with this? Or, just kind of collaborating all these different ideas together and being flexible and being able to adapt Ben likes to joke with me every Sunday morning. I'll come in and be like, all right, so how's the worship set looking? What did we change?
What's changed? Not did it change, what's changed?
Because there's an expectation it's going to change, yeah.
Yeah. We're wiping the whole set. We're doing something different.
Remember the songs we practiced? We're not doing
Right.
those now.
You're singing everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I find interesting about the nines, so nines are part of what's called the gut triad. And the triads, what a triad is a triad, each type belongs to a triad. You have 3 triads. You have gut, heart, and head. And each one of those also has an emotion. It's kind of an emotional center of intelligence. And for the 9, they're part of what's called the gut triad, and they lean into anger. Well, as a 9, part of the thing that's funny is 9s bury their anger because they fall asleep to that. Yeah. When things change or when this happens, how does that come up in you? I mean, do you find yourself ever getting angry, or is it more of like tell us a little bit of what's it like to be a 9 when things are not going the way you think they should, or when they're not going the way they should be, or they want to be?
Yeah, well, just in general, I know for myself, I tend to notice things that I feel like people, typically it'll come out where I notice things that people are doing that aren't really beneficial to anyone else.
Yeah.
Or, if it's, the stereotype would be like, oh, somebody cut me off in traffic. I go, what are you doing? What are you doing? And it's immediately.
That's not beneficial to anyone.
Right, yeah. And I'm not necessarily irritated, at least this is what I tell myself. I'm not irritated on my own behalf. I'm like, dude, there's other people. What are you doing? There's other people.
So that's what's going
you.
on in your head, but what you're doing on the outside is probably like, hey, I hope you have a great day.
Exactly.
Because you don't want that.
Exactly.
My hand goes up. Like when somebody cuts me off, my immediate reaction is anger. Like, what? Come on. Like I become Italian very quickly.
You know what's funny?
Hey.
Is if someone like cuts me off, I go, okay. And then I like, so I don't get mad about it. I'm just like, oh, all right, game on.
See, yeah.
So do you like cut them off then? Or is it like, or we just
back
got a little
and
too
forth.
personal?
It is going so much better now that I live in Clear Lake. But when I lived in Minneapolis,
This is a true thing.
Yeah, it was all over the place.
No.
Here, the only thing that cuts you off is golf carts.
Yeah. In which case, I'm just like, they're just on their way to golf.
They're
That's
just
fine.
on the way.
That's fine.
Or, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I just, you're right. I don't really like to acknowledge when something maybe upsets me or irks me the wrong way. I'll just be like, no, it's fine. It's cool. It's all right. It's all good.
Yeah.
It'll work out.
I think you told me once that if I want your opinion, I should ask twice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. You say, hey, how do you feel about this thing? Or, hey, we're all going to the movies. Do you want to go? My immediate reaction is, yeah, or good, or
Sure.
really something positive. Sure.
Yeah.
And asking me again gives me the chance to be like, wait, do I actually want to do that? Or am I just saying yes?
Yeah.
So from a dynamic, from a team perspective, or even a friendship perspective, when working with a 9 or when you're friends or married to a 9 or in a relationship with a 9, that's the hardest part because your gut reaction is to agree.
Yeah, kind of
Yeah.
slide right along.
And so
Yeah.
when we come into times of crisis or stress or when things are going about, it sounds like one of the first things that can be done is to actually give you an opportunity to think through it. I've talked to other 9s, and one of the things they'll say is, even when I think through it, I still won't say it.
Well, yeah, that's the other part of it, yeah.
So is there anything that you would encourage if we're in a relationship or if I'm working together, what's the best way to draw out the honesty of the 9? And part of it is we all have a tendency to fall asleep to ourselves, to fall asleep to our desires, but 9s are the most likely. 9s are the most likely to deny their wants or needs or feelings because they kind of merge with everybody else's opinion.
Yeah. Well, especially in the coronavirus
Yeah.
season, right? Oh, well, everyone's kind of going around and doing everything, and like, hey, what can I do? What's the easiest for you?
And I'll say, I mean, we've worked together now for almost 2 years. Is that right? Has it been almost 2
think
years?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost 2 years. And I see you as a very healthy 9. I've often heard you express your thoughts or opinions, but I know there are times when you stuff down because you shared that. What's something that if, let's say, you're a leader or if somebody who's managing you or in a relationship, are there questions or are there different ways they can do it? Not just the time, but there are things that they can use to help you be honest with yourself. Because I think one of the things that I love is that you don't talk very often, but when you do,
Profound.
it's super profound
Yeah.
or helpful
Sure.
or really funny.
Insanely funny.
Insanely funny. We actually, we were in staff one day, and there was this word that we didn't know.
Doc used the expression horse apiece.
That's what it was, the horse.
yeah.
And there was another staff member that misheard and said horse of peace. And so then asked,
Isn't
Which
that
is
what you
not
said
a
the
real
first time?
phrase. It's not a
Isn't that
real
what you said the
phrase at
first
all.
time?
no, horse a piece.
Horse apiece.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's horse of peace, which was what was misheard.
Yeah,
And,
not a thing, not a real phrase.
No, not a thing. So they said, so what is this? And then John went into this elaborate
So elaborate.
example of how when you look at the language used in the text,
Wasn't it Latin or something like that? If you go back to the Latin.
Yeah, Latin
And
or
we're all
Arabic.
believing it.
Yeah.
and we're all listening just. I had no idea, and how do you know this?
Yeah, well, and then I ended it by saying I made that all up.
You did it for like 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
This
you
is
know.
all completely false.
and we were all drawn in, like, how does he know? Because I thought, why wouldn't you know? You're also a writer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you sing and write, and you write a lot of the plays and stuff for us, as well as a lot of the information that goes out. So what are some ways? I mean, we asked the question, and my sevenness got distracted.
And I answered the question.
Then you answered the question. What are some things that help you to be more honest or to express? Are there anything that you could give to those around you to help?
Yeah. Well, if there is an interaction between myself and another person, as much as I hate to say it, one of the best things that you can do is asking that question again, and not necessarily giving me an opinion to think about, but more like, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
And I go, but well, what do you think about? No. Tell me first, Mr. 9 or Miss 9. Tell me what you're thinking and how you feel about this particular situation. Because then it gives me a chance to voice what maybe I have been thinking about it for
Yeah.
a long time. I'm just not saying anything, or maybe I haven't had time to process it.
And help us understand what's going through the mind of the 9 that they don't feel like they can or need to share their opinions. I mean, and
Yeah.
that's, again,
Yeah,
we've had
great.
conversation about this, but I'd love to hear that.
Well, sometimes it's just there's so many great ideas going on right now. I don't need to add anything.
Yeah.
There's people are talking back and forth. I don't need to contribute right now because they got it. They're fine. And other times it just is as simple as, well, I don't really want to rock the boat right now. I don't want to say anything that people might go, wow, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't want to say anything that people might go, well, why are you saying anything? Why are you talking? No, don't say that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a bit of an extreme as a reaction, but that's maybe my thought is, I don't want to say anything in case people are like, that's dumb. No, don't say. Why are you talking? Shh.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Now,
Go away.
Stacy's married to a 9, and I want to get to you as well, Stacy, because you're a type 1, and you're a 1-to-1-1. You're like the Trinity, the 1-to-1-1. I'd love to hear from you, but you're married to a 9, right? And I'd love to hear, what's that like being married to a 9 who often doesn't share their opinion?
It can be pretty frustrating sometimes when it almost feels like you have to guess what they're thinking. And as a 1-to-1-1, I want the people that I'm in close relationship with to feel that I'm perfect. And so if my husband 9 isn't sharing his thoughts or feelings or telling me what he's thinking in any given situation, then it's really hard for me because I'm like, oh, well, you clearly think I'm imperfect. And
So you take it personally.
yeah, I do. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where if I were perfect, or if we had the perfect relationship, then you would be able to share with me. You'd be able to you'd be able to talk to me, things like that.
Yeah, and I want to take a quick second here. Ben is actually on Facebook Live, so if
Yeah.
you have questions or you have comments, he's monitoring that so that I can focus on
Actually,
this.
we do have our first question.
Yeah, what's the first question?
And it's kind of along those lines, Stacey.
And can you say who it's from, or do they? Is that okay?
I'm sure I could. It's from Molly.
Okay. Your wife.
It's
Okay.
my wife, Molly. So she asked, in quarantine, are there triggers for each of you? And for those in life, how can we avoid, handle, or help?
We're getting there, Molly. Give us some time.
The people want to know, Jason. They want to know.
So let's, Stacy, real quickly, before we forget, I'd love for you to share. You're a type 1, the one-to-one one. Share a little bit about what it's been like for you and part of this team, but also what helps you as a one to manage through this? I keep on looking at her. They told me not to look at her, but it's so hard because
She's right there.
She's like right there, and so apparently when I look here, I'm looking at her. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself. We had a one-on last week, and she's a different. I think she's a social one, if I remember correctly, Jenna Los. And you're what's called the one-to-one one or the sexual one. I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself and kind of what it's like for you as a one in the midst of this and working with the team.
So it's been pretty interesting with the whole pandemic situation. For me, it was super fascinating because we were actually traveling in Asia, visiting my sister who lives in Taiwan when when everything kind of started to happen, and so we were in an Asian country and honestly felt super safe there. So it was fascinating to come back to the U.S. because we came back March 8th or something, and which was right before pretty much the entire country shut down and everything happened. And so it was fascinating to go from a country where really we felt super safe, super secure, nothing was happening, to come back and then everyone's kind of in an uproar. So for me, it's been interesting over the last few weeks to kind of go from, okay, things are fine, things are okay, to, oh, this is kind of a huge deal and people are handling it differently, and seeing that there's a lot of different reactions to a pandemic.
So from the critical side, because part of the one is things aren't good or they're not good. And interestingly, whereas a self-preservation and social one focus more on themselves, the one-to-one one or the sexual one tends to focus on others. And that's what actually makes them different. And that's one of the beauty of understanding subtypes. You can have, again, 3 different ones, and each one is going to respond differently or see differently. So, Stacy, what's that like for you when the critical side is not about, you already know you're doing the right thing. It's looking at or at least you perceive you're doing the right thing. How does that pan out in how you look at others? And I'd also love, what's it like working with 2 other people that have different value systems, and you guys
are not perfect.
Who are not perfect. How does that play out for you? And this actually will get us to Molly's question, which is I want to talk a little bit about what are the triggers in the midst of stress. Like, what are the things that kind of get to those dark sides of you that people may not be aware of? So share a little bit, what's that like for you, because your focus is on others and them not doing well.
It's been very interesting, especially as things have progressed and gotten essentially worse, I guess. I mean, it's kind of weird to say it's gotten worse, but it really has. But I mean, to go out into the community, and there was one week where I had to run some errands out in Mason, and I went over there, and the store I went into, most people were wearing masks and doing other things, and I'm like, this is so outside the norm for this area, for where we live, that it was really shocking to me to be like, oh, okay, we're actually taking this seriously now. Whereas that was kind of the first point that I saw that other people were starting to take it seriously. I was taking it seriously because I try and do everything possible to make sure that I'm, following the rules or parameters that have been set out. Yeah. So it was interesting to be like, okay, now everyone else is kind of joining in. People are, they're also kind of joining in the rules and things like that.
And 1 is part of the gut triad, which leads to anger. And whereas the 9, you stuff that anger, and you fall asleep to it. So it's there. Stacy, as a 1, anger's not good, and so you'll deny the anger, but it's always there. Tell me a little bit about how does that anger work itself out? And then from there, I'd love to talk about what's that look like from a team dynamic, because you have a 3 it's performance, its image. You have a 9 who's just kind of like, hey, whatever. I'd love for you to share, how does the anger come out in you? What does that look like?
My poor husband.
I love we're talking about team, and let's just go back to the husband because he really gets it. Yeah, go ahead.
But honestly, for me, my poor husband, because with a 1, the anger is always under the surface. It's always there. It's always bubbling. It's always boiling. You just have to really feel like you're in a safe location to even consider letting it out.
That's my secret cap.
So it's one of those things where a lot of times I'll have a stressful day or what I perceive as a stressful day, or I'll get a phone call or something, and then I'll go home and my poor husband has to deal with the brunt of my frustration, anger, basically not knowing what to do, things like that.
So let's talk about triggers. I'd love to hear, every type has something that kind of sets them off. It gets to that insecurity. I know as a 7, I know what I'm learning more and more what mine are.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
And early on, if I could give any tip to people that are working or doing the work of the Enneagram is not something that you just take a test. And then there's constantly work that's going on. And I've had several conversations with individuals who say things like, well, I just want to know what I am. And part of the beauty of the Enneagram is the more you do it, the more you discover and uncover. And sometimes your number might change.
Yeah.
Like you might think you're one thing, and then over time you discover, no, I thought I was that, but in reality I was really stressed out, or there were other things going on, or I wasn't being honest with myself.
Yeah.
And I remember, Ben, we had this conversation, and here's my tip. Never weaponize the Enneagram.
Yeah.
Never, because, and I think it was either you or Molly as his wife, who shared that the Enneagram really gets to things that you're not telling anybody about.
No. Someone said once, they're just like, oh, I feel like I'm naked. And what I said was, I would rather be naked than for people to know some of this stuff that goes on in my head.
Yeah.
It's incredibly revealing.
Yeah. So I think if we're aware, and this is part of the reason why we want to do these interviews, is we can actually begin to understand what is it that in moments of stress that can set you off or trigger deep insecurities or cause those parts of you that you want to hide. And I'll be honest, early on when we started this, you guys have been along on this journey with me for quite a while. I introduced the Enneagram to our staff almost 2.5 years ago.
I think so, yeah.
And I got introduced to it during my master's program in 2009, I think it was. But we would joke around knowing the insecurities that each type has. And it was always in jest. It was never meant to be mean.
Yeah.
And I was listening to a podcast with Ian Morgan Cron. He has typology, wrote the book Road Back to You. Highly encourage it. He's way smarter than I am, knows way more about this than I do. And he made the comment about not weaponizing. And how that's one of the things that we'll do is we can take this information, even in jest, but it's almost like picking at a scab that you don't know is there, or a wound. And I think those are the triggers. So I'd love to hear, what are some things that trigger you as a 3? What triggers you as a 9? What can trigger you as a 1? So Ben, tell me a little bit, what are some things in times of stress, what are trigger points for you?
It's if I'm looking to achieve, right? If I'm a 3, if I'm an achiever, if I'm a producer, if I'm a performer, those times that are going to be a trigger are any time that it's a failure, or any time that it doesn't even really have to be big. Actually, usually it's the smaller ones. Like if I drop the ball massively, yes, that I do not like that. No one likes that. But I've actually found it's the smaller things. So like last night I was at home and we're having dinner, and I'm in the middle of several projects because I'm in my house and I have to do something. So like I've painted a couple walls and I'm ripping apart a piano, and I've got some stuff cleared out in the basement, and Molly was like, because I've got some stuff at the bottom of the stairs, and Molly said like, oh, like you've got stuff at the bottom of the stairs, and that actually probably dug at me more than like we've had issues with some of the, because we're doing things so fresh and so new. Some of the syndication hasn't been working, and that actually probably dug a little bit more than this. And not because Molly was even being malicious. She was being playful. She was being fun.
Yeah.
But it was one of those where me, in my insecurity, it was a persistent failure sitting at the bottom of the stairs, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And
so
so it's just sitting there, and I know
it's
there.
like glaring at you.
Yeah, absolutely. And
And now you've pointed it out.
Thanks for reminding
Thank
me.
you.
And that's the thing. So if anyone's going to point out a failure, it's like I knew about it years ago. You know, like
Sure.
I that's all I think about because that's all I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah.
And so so then when someone else points it out, it ends up stinging. But what I found was really interesting was it's usually the smaller ones, the little things that like I just totally like I either totally forgot or I know it's there but I haven't had time.
Yeah.
Like especially if they end up being persistent like that. Like it's been at the bottom of the stairs. Like maybe it's only been there a week. But even still, that's 7 days. That's just
Well-
been
A long time.
there.
Yep.
You know, it's
So,
just there.
and part of the triad for the three, because they're in the heart triad, and what there is that image. But what threes do is they fall asleep to the shame or sadness. And so one of the things we talk about that every number can go into what we call a sin or a dark side. And the sin for the three is to go into lying or deceit. And it's usually not lying to other people. It's deceiving yourselves.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't think it was The Road Back to You. Maybe it was like I think there's the book Enneagram in Love and Work.
Yep, Helen Palmer. Yep.
Yeah, and I think it was in that one they said if you're reading this and you think every three is lying to you, though you should feel sorry for your threes because the person they lie to the most is themselves.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh no.
So when that happens, and I think this is so helpful to know because if you're in a relationship with a three, or if you're managing a three or working with a three, that fear of failure, what does it make you feel when that happens? What kind of goes through the mind of a three?
Here's the it's a double-edged sword. It's a catch-22. It's one of those where threes actually don't even mind being held accountable because now I know the steps to succeed. You know
what the expectation is.
Absolutely. But like that's also the thing that I'm trying to avoid. It's a lose-lose. Everyone loses.
Yeah. Well, and I think actually every number has that.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
we all have these catch-22s in our personality, which is where the beauty of the Enneagram, the wisdom of the Enneagram, is when you're honest with yourself. That's how you deal with the lie.
Yeah.
That's how you're able to go, no, that's not true. Like, people aren't ashamed of me. And unless you've done something that is worthy of shame or disappointment, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time when somebody fails, there's a lot of grace. But the three doesn't take it that way.
Yeah, it's like I mean, it's a lose-lose type of thing. I'm not saying that I'm right in any way for doing it, because I see it happening in my head. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, because really, if you hold me accountable, now I know how to succeed. Great, and like one of the best things you could do is just give a three a list. I'm gonna have that list done by noon if possible. You know,
And one's love list too, which is great that you and Stacy work together.
Stacy is amazing. is absolutely amazing. Truly keeps the whole thing together. Because we like really with this we've been putting in long hours, and I think what's really easy, especially for me and Stacy, is when we're putting in long hours, to not only put in the long hours, but then to justify the long hours. And like, well, you know, Corona and Jesus,
Yeah.
you know, and it's just like you can't argue with any of those.
Yeah.
So what we have to do is set boundaries for ourselves. Like I don't think the Ben of 3 years ago would have done well in this. I think he would have. It would have been midnight to midnight, and then being mad if anyone even suggested taking a nap.
So, and there's a reason
which
for
I would.
As a
might
9,
do
you'd have
that.
no problem taking a nap. So when the 3 is stressed, the 3 goes to the 9 in stress, and unlike the 9 where they can get to the point where they what I call it slothing out, where they take a nap, what they'll do is they'll fall asleep to the fact that they have needs, and so they'll go immediately into overwork. And they become workaholics, and they actually can become mean and expect other people to put in ridiculous amounts of hours, and they'll take on the burden themselves. And how they go to the 9 is they fall asleep to the fact that, no, you need rest, or no, you need help. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I've enjoyed watching over the last couple years, especially as you've been doing your Enneagram work, is you're relying more and more on other people and not doing that. And I think that's part of that trigger. So, John, as a 9, that the tendency for the 9 is to fall asleep to themselves, but they actually go into sloth or a laziness, right? And again, I don't see that in you. You're a very productive 9, and I think that's one of the things we want to be careful with stereotypes. What triggers you as a 9? Like, are there things that people can say
Other
or
than
do?
me.
Other than Ben. Other than Ben. Are there
We've been
things
going midnight to midnight. He won't take a nap. What is this?
are there things that people can say or do? Or let's just be honest, would you even acknowledge if they did trigger you?
Well, that's I was going to say. That is the first thing that I would say is that no, I don't have any triggers, none whatsoever. They don't exist. But it is interesting. I've noticed in myself, and this goes back to like weaponizing the Enneagram.
Yeah.
There are a lot of fun videos that I've seen recently, because can't leave my house, can't go anywhere else. So about the Enneagram, I've seen these fun videos where people are like, musical numbers that relate to your Enneagram type and stuff like that, And they're all in good fun, but a lot of them, when they get to the 9, is like, oh yeah, and then I take a nap 4 times a day, and then another one. And I'm like, I don't just sleep, people, all right? Look, come on.
Well, and the idea of the 9 is not that they're lazy. That's, I think,
Right.
sometimes the misunderstanding, is that they fall asleep to themselves. They're lazy about their own opinions or the ability to feel. And so when we talk about triggers, for instance, are there things that make you want to bury your needs even more? Because when a 9 feels secure, when a 9 is in health, they're actually very honest. They have and that's one of the reasons why we need 9s. When 9s are at their best, they not only produce well, but they help other people move. That's why they're called the peacemakers. The difference between a peacemaker and a peacekeeper, peacekeeping is just doing a bunch of rules, right? And you can fall asleep when you're peacekeeping. Peacemaking takes work, takes effort. And so when things are pressing in, are the things that people say or do that make you want to kind of crawl deeper away from yourself or to fall asleep, if that makes any sense?
Well, when the days get to a point where there's, we got to do all the stuff, and then I have later in the day when I'm going out meeting with people, or I'm, got event after event, I can get a little bit burned out, but I won't say anything because it's like, no, I said I would be here for this event, or I said I would help out at this volunteer thing, or whatever it is. It's like, no, I said I would be here. I am here. Too bad. I can't say, well, I'm bowing out. I'm burnt out a little bit. I'm going to step away right now.
And you have, and I think this is maybe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, sometimes it's hard because if you're working with a 3 who's a go, 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 and you're like, no, I need pace in my life. Is that pretty accurate? Like for you, there's a pace?
Yeah. But it works the other way too, because I mean, I don't know if this is, I hope this is true, but coming in when we are going and doing 15 things at a time and trying to get all these things done, I can come in and say, all right, we can step back. We can take a breath now.
Yeah.
We can breathe. We got this thing done. We've set up. We can break for a little bit.
Yeah.
We can remember to rest, because it's very go go go. It's very, we've got 15 things to do and we're gonna get them all done, which is great. Especially when you have to turn around a whole worship setting in a couple of days to get ready for this Corona season.
And I think that might be helpful. So one of the things that is a benefit for worship and creative arts is you have projects that have starts and stops. They're not just something that happens, it's just always bleeding on. So even like worship, when the worship is done, that's the end of that project to go on to the next project, even if the next project is another worship set.
Yeah.
And that, I think sometimes that can be helpful for you guys, especially as a 9 and as a 3, as a 1, if you know what the end looks like, and you know what the beginning looks like, you know how to celebrate it or to say, now I can move on.
Yeah.
It gets harder when there is no stop, when it's just a continual thing, right?
Yeah.
Go
Well,
ahead.
it's funny. It's funny. I always feel like with all the different numbers, there's always like a pull or a desire to do something. Like for the 3, it's like, well, I got to do the next thing. I got to be success. I'm only as successful as my last success. Right?
That's right,
For
yeah.
me, it's like it's almost the opposite, where I'm like, oh, I think I would hate like doing all these things. You relax in the sense of like, all right, well, I'm gonna just do some painting, or I'm gonna move some furniture around, or I'm gonna do, take on this next project. I'm like, nah, man, I'm just gonna like not do anything. That's what I want to do. That's my pull. I'm just gonna.
Yeah. So one of the ways that you can love a 9 is to actually give them space to breathe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
As
not
much-
make them feel guilty about it.
Yeah. As much as I wouldn't admit that if someone was like, hey, do you need some time where you're just by yourself? Like, even in a relationship
Let
setting.
me ask the question. Should they ask the question or just tell you need some time? Because,
Hey, I will give you some time.
yeah, because it sounds like even if they offer it, you'd go, oh, no, I'm fine. So
I sure would.
maybe
I
the
sure
better way
would.
to do it is, instead of asking, do they need it? It's telling them, hey, I'm gonna
do this now.
or why don't you take this time?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the kids to, I don't know, somewhere, or I'm gonna work on this thing over here. You
Yeah.
can take some time.
I think that's really helpful because
Yeah.
a lot of us, we want to ask people what they need, but as a 9, you won't share your needs. So if I ask the question, that
It's a
gives
lot
you
harder. Yeah,
it
it's a
gives
lot
you the
harder for
right
us.
to defer.
Well, and Stacy mentioned this too about interacting with a 9. A lot of the times when I don't say anything or I don't share anything, it's because I just don't see the need to. It's not
Yeah.
even like, I don't value my own opinion. It's just, I
It's
don't
okay.
need to. I'm listening to you.
Yeah.
What's going on? Tell me what's going on.
So so for Ben, let's back up for you. For one of the ways we can encourage a 3 would be acknowledging the fact that you already have this inner critic inside of you that's looking at failure.
Yeah.
And Jenna, my friend Jenna, last week, if you haven't had a chance, check out that episode. It was
really great.
It was
really great.
She did an amazing job.
Yeah, she was great.
But she made the comment about being kind in your criticism, being gentle in your criticism. Because you've already got that inner critic, and that's one of the things that triggers you is when people point things out. Is it about being kind in criticism, or how's a good way to approach that? And I'd love to hear, how does the 9 balance that out in you? Because you take criticism very differently.
Pretty well, I'd like to think.
Yeah. So how do you guys lean into each other? And then I'd love to hear from Stacy, what triggers you, and how does all this mesh together? Because you have a 3, a 9, and a 1 who work together, and in a lot of ways that works well.
Yeah, I'd like to think it works really well. But what was the first part of that question?
So how can we encourage you? Like, right? How do we deal with that inner critic so that we're having compassion? With where you are?
I mean, if it's one of those where because again, I'm not saying don't tell a 3 the things they're doing wrong, because if they're doing it wrong, you should, and ultimately we do want to know.
Yeah.
I think as long as there's a respect about it, as long as there's a respect about it, and then if feelings are hurt by it, just I don't know, just say sorry, and then and then I think we can all move on.
Would it be fair to say if it doesn't need to be said, don't say it? Which I think that's true for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true for everyone. But yeah, it's one of those where no, we want to know how we can be better because we want to be the best.
Yeah.
So no, you should absolutely say something. Just be kind about it. There's no reason to be. Just be nice to other humans.
That's good advice.
Just
That's-
overall,
Just be nice.
I don't care which 27 types you are. Like, no.
Well, and I think this is helpful in our relationship because threes are project oriented, and they love when things are short. So and we all do this, right? I'll come in and sometimes I'll think that my need is urgent, and half the time it's not. And when you're in the zone, when you're working, what's the best way that somebody can approach you when you are knee deep in trying to get something done? Do they just need to avoid you, or like?
No. No. I would say, like, if it's just like hey, I know you're working. I'd love to talk about this when you got a second. Perfect. Like, that's awesome.
And then be done. So like 7 words or less.
Especially if it's like in the mode. Molly calls it my go mode. when I'm in my go mode, it's one of those where like, I love you. Like I love.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the thing, because even if I can help you, I want to help you do that. I'm doing this thing right now, and I think what gets a little bit hard is when you focus so much on behavior, like you were saying, like don't just take a test, because I took a test and it pointed me more towards a 2 than a 3, and then so I was battling between 2, 3, and 7 for a long time. And I spent a lot of time on 7 because I was looking at behaviors.
I actually thought you were a 7 when we first started looking at this.
And that's the thing is, like, when you look at behaviors, even my brother, he was like, "Are you sure you're not a 7?" I'm like, mine's not a runaway type of thing. Like, it's not like I'm looking for something type of thing. Even when times get hard, I like to lean into it. I think when you were talking about stances,
we'll get it. We haven't talked about stances yet.
that here,
Yeah.
but when talking about stances, no, I'm gonna lean in. Like a time like this, I'm gonna lean into it
Aggressively. I'm gonna
lean into it.
Nothing's
pretty
gonna
hard.
get in the way of your success.
No. And that's so part of it. Like if you're approaching a 3 while they're working, just I'd love to talk about this. No, you're working, because then there's a respect for what's happening right now and the fact that it's important to me.
Yeah.
But then also on the 3 side, it's realizing this person's also important to you.
Yeah.
And just there's a difference between urgent and important.
Sure.
And like there's a lot of things that fall into urgent for a 3. But that doesn't mean they're important. That just means they're urgent, and they're things that you can check off a list.
Tyranny of the urgent things.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
may appear urgent, but they're not. Stacy, for you as a 1, how do you guys interact together? And I'd love to hear what are triggers for you. Again, we talked a little bit about this last week with Jenna Los, but she's a different type of 1. So I'd love to hear what are your triggers, and how do you work with a 3 and a 9, knowing that you guys can trigger each other if you're not careful?
Well, yeah, that's a super fascinating question, because Ben and I have actually had some pretty frank discussions about he's so goal-oriented, and I'm so much, I see everything that has to be done, and then I proceed to make a list on how we can get everything done. So between the two of us, if we aren't careful and if we don't set really good boundaries for ourselves, we'll never see our family. Like, we'll never see our families. We'll never see anyone else, because we'll just be getting everything on the list done.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, has been kind of the most eye-opening thing on the way that we work together is we need to be very careful about setting boundaries on, okay, we can only get 3 things done today. We can only get this done. We can't do all of this. And then, like, personally, my biggest trigger is when my husband tells me that I should take a moment and calm down. And I'm like, but my anger fuels me. My anger fuels me. If I don't have my anger, what do I have?
Which is something a 9 might say. Hey, just chill.
Let's just calm down.
Take a moment.
Exactly. And I mean, I don't fault him, because that's what he wants. He wants peace. He wants harmony. But for me, it's like, no, like I have 10 million things that I have to get done, and I see all of them, and I'm trying to prioritize them. And you telling me that I need to take a moment and breathe, or take a moment and seek some peace. Like, nope. There's so many things that have to get done.
So, John, I have a question for you then as the 9, because 9s are really good about taking a moment.
Yeah, real good.
Do you guys as a team, and this is when all numbers are healthy, when they're placed in security and that they're functioning at their best, they bring out the best in each other and themselves, right? Do you guys as a team lean on each other's numbers that way? And then I know we have a couple questions from Facebook, from our Facebook Live that Ben won. But I'd love to hear, how does your 9 kind of bridge that gap for the 1 and the 3 who are go, got my list, 10 million things, and you're just like, hey, do we really need to worry about all this right now?
Yeah, well, for me, I think default is I don't view a lot of things as important or urgent.
Yeah.
A lot of things are like, well, I'll get to it, which can absolutely bite me in the butt, because I won't take things seriously, or I won't really focus on things that are important. So I think it's easier for me to look at something and go, do we need to do this right now? No, probably not. Let's leave it off. Let's, leave it for another day.
Do you ever vocalize that, or do you just hope they'll figure it out?
Every now and then, but like, I think I'm in this setting, in this team. I tend to come alongside and say, what do we need to do? All right, well, let's do that right now, because there are a lot of things to do, you know.
Yeah. And a lot of them are urgent.
Yeah.
There are things that are
Yeah.
important. Yeah. So yeah, go
I
ahead.
know. It has been said though that me being in the team is really I was gonna say breath of fresh air. Maybe that's not.
You're
the right
like
thing, but
Xanax for the soul.
maybe that's
you
a
are
better way to
like
say it.
everything just kind of feels chill when you're around because
Thanks for this.
you are like if there was like an emotional EKG, you're like this, right? It's a boop boop.
It's very
And it's not
steady.
that you don't emote; it's that not much riles you. And so when things kind of go sideways, or when you have this stress, you got the three who's like, "We got to get this done," and the one saying, "These are the things that need to get done now," and you're just like, "Okay." All right, let's get a couple of these questions, and then we got about 10 minutes here.
Yep. So our second question will come from Bianca. She asks, with COVID-19, so many of us have started new projects. So how does each type deal with the setbacks and success?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there either one of you that want to?
Well, I know. I think as I've been praying and seeking God in this whole thing, I think that God is telling the world. If there's a message that God was telling the world at this point, it'd be God's got it. We had those great signs that we made and gave people to stick in their yards. God's got it. And for me personally, I don't think He's telling me that. I was like, oh yeah, I know God's got it. Totally. I know it. I know God's got it. But for me, it's more like, don't miss the opportunities of this season. Even though it's
that's
crazy
good.
and hectic and people are quarantined and we don't get to interact as much as we want to, don't miss the opportunities of this season. And so I've been able to lean more into prayer and lean more into other projects that are more for me,
So
more of,
would it be fair to say that the best project you can work on right now is yourself?
yeah.
I mean, I think that's a lot of people assume like I got to get stuff done around the house, or I've got to do this, or I don't. When you lose your job, that you lose that sense of work is an ongoing project,
Yeah.
and right now this is a great opportunity to work on yourself, and to work on your family dynamics, and to become a healthier. I mean, this is in a lot of ways people have been slowed down because of this, and I'll tell you, I think in myself, I have to remind myself, there are some things I don't have to do anymore. But there are also some things that this allows me the privilege to do right now that wouldn't if we weren't in this season. And it's so unknown in my lifetime. I mean, I'm in my 40s. I've never had anything like this in my life. I don't think
Yeah.
anybody has.
No.
How about you, Stace? What would you say about read the question one more time just so we're...
Oh, so let me scroll back up. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
I put you on the spot, my bad.
With COVID-19, so many of us have been starting new projects. So how does each type deal with setbacks and success?
I think that I agree with John that the most important thing that you can do right now is really to kind of look at your own life, especially because you really shouldn't leave your house, but to look at your own life, to look at your family dynamics, to look at those things and say, okay, how can I be more Christ-like coming out of this? What can I do to really seek Him, to really kind of work on myself and my family and my close relationships, the people that I'm there with? And there are so many things that you can get done in this time. When I go home, I tend to get caught up in all the different things that need to be done at my house because I'm there a little more often than I normally would be. But really taking a look and sinking into the Word and spending time with Him and saying, okay, what can I personally learn from this time?
And the setback question, I think, is a big one. We call that grace, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's part of it is we don't know with COVID, there's a lot of unknown about how this is affecting the psychology of people.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of fear and a lot of unknown. And there are some numbers, and I wish we had time to get into stances. There are some of us that just want to push back and say, oh, we don't need to be afraid. But there are other people, like this brings out so much fear.
Yeah.
And I think we need to have grace when we don't accomplish the things that we think we should. My wife and I were just talking about this morning. She's put on furlough for her work, and she made the comment, she goes, I feel like I should be getting more done around the house. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you're also spending time with the kids, and
Yeah.
you're getting kind of that break.
Yeah.
And I think having some grace when those setbacks happen, instead of seeing it as failure, there are so many emotional dynamics that are taking place right now that I think if more and more people could have grace on themselves, especially if they understand their Enneagram type.
Yeah.
I also want to say real quickly, and then let's get to one more question before
Yeah.
we close out. I think for Christians, and I realize not everybody who watches this is a Christian, and the Enneagram is not a Christian thing. It's not it's not biblical, though there are things in it that clearly match up with Scripture.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be a Christian to be influenced by the Enneagram. And I think it's important for us that are Christians to recognize the Enneagram is a tool. It's not the only tool. And Jesus is the only thing for us that we believe saves and transforms. And when you put the Enneagram with the gospel, or we allow the work of the Holy Spirit as a believer, the Enneagram becomes a great way for me to say, here are the things in my life that are keeping me from being who God wants me to be. And then I get to
Exactly.
submit it to Jesus, right?
Yeah. So even when Stacy was saying, how can I become more Christ-like throughout this whole thing? I think that's any number across the board. I think you end up looking at it that way. Is the Enneagram is not Christian.
But it's an incredibly helpful tool for Christians. Yeah.
It's an incredibly helpful tool because you end up you spend time reflecting on who God is, and then you spend time reflecting on who you are, and realizing that who you've built this case up in your mind of who you are. I am my successes.
Yeah.
No, you're not.
No.
I'm a child of God.
Yeah.
I'm a child of God, and He loves me despite my failures.
That's the grace
You
in the
know?
Enneagram.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah, for me, it's just like God gives me the strength to
Yeah.
do what I need to do, and He's called me to these
Yeah.
good works.
Yeah.
They're out there. They're good. You just got to trust me and go for it.
And one of
you
the
know?
criticisms that I've heard from individuals in the faith community is that they think we're putting our trust in the Enneagram. My trust
No.
isn't in the Enneagram. The Enneagram is just a tool. It's just that.
no, and that's the thing is if even if I would have just started reading and I wasn't a Christian, I would have stopped.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, no, we can't do anything like that. But I think even when you read what Paul writes, where it's just like, no, there's this sinful nature inside of me. Like the world is broken.
I'm broken.
I'm broken.
I'd love to think I'm not, but I am.
I'm
yeah.
broken. I'm messed up. I'm screwed up. I'm in need of a savior. The Enneagram is no savior.
And it
Yeah.
does help you see those areas that you need salvation in.
Yeah.
And each type, because all of us have that shadow side. All right, let's take one more question. We might go a little bit longer than an hour, but not much. One last question.
So, well, first, Cindy, I saw yours. The other book that I mentioned was The Enneagram in Love and Work, but I can't remember the
Helen Palmer.
Helen Palmer.
Great book.
Yeah.
There's Beatrice Chestnut also has some great stuff in talking about the Enneagram in a work environment. I've actually got a few books that I'll show at the end here, just to kind of encourage people to resources. But
Yeah, and it was really great because it breaks down the number, then it talks about that number in a romantic relationship with each other number, and then that number in a working relationship with each other number.
Yeah.
And it's really
Pretty
great.
extensive.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really great. I very much enjoy it. This one comes from Kate. For the goal-oriented people, if you didn't have tasks to do immediately, do you think you would react differently in this crisis time?
Oh yeah. So if there was, like, let's say we didn't have technology, how would you? What would you do?
So I thought about that, and so like even Bianca's question before, there's the other side of that question. Like I've started all these projects, I've started doing this. Like how do you deal with the setbacks and failures of those projects? There are people now that are laid off of work, that are
Yeah.
furloughed. That so you've got a lot of goal-oriented people who are forced to sit on their hands right now, and so for me, the growth in this is like I do have plenty to do. So now it's how do I maintain and realize that it's not you're not going to be more successful if you work midnight to midnight. You're going to die.
And if they weren't here, your success, who you are as a person, is not determined by what you
Exactly.
have to get
So
done.
like
Yeah.
so the backside of that question is so like even before when we were saying like if there's a 3 working, what do you do? If there's a 3 not working, it's really I love you even when you don't do things.
That's good. Yeah,
I
yeah.
love you not when you don't do things. I love you whether or not you do things.
Because the three finds their value in what they get done.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can't get stuff done, for someone to just simply say, I love you because of you, not
Yeah.
because of what you get done for me or how successful you are.
Yep.
And threes probably love report cards.
Yeah. Well,
when they're A's.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
No A minuses. Got to be A's.
But that's the thing is if it's a B, if it's a C, if it's a D, if it's an F, it's one of those where you're like, yeah, grieve it, and then we're gonna get it.
Yeah.
You know, and then it's gonna be an A the next time it comes around.
Yeah.
But so like for the goal oriented people, how do you react differently? I don't know. I think I would probably then my struggle would be I'm going stir crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do. And then it's one of those where, like, if you needed a project, the project is, I think we said it before, the project is you then.
Yeah.
You, and then if you are a Christian, you lean in hard. This is your chance to read all the things you don't have time to read. This is your chance to listen to podcasts and to study. And I don't know, I might actually practice piano.
It might
So-
feel like you're doing not a lot.
So I
but-
can actually
yeah.
I can bridge this gap with the 9 and the 3 also, because again, you guys lean into each other. For 3s and 9s, if there's not projects to do, 9s are okay if there's no projects to do.
Right.
Because for them, it's like, oh, I can breathe. The 3, even though the 9 is where they go to in stress, that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that they can actually draw upon the good side of the 9, which a 3, when they're able to be honest with themselves and healthy, can say, wait a second, I don't need to be successful right now.
Yeah.
Right now we're in such a time where if there are no tasks, not only is it successful just to breathe, that is the success, is the fact that you've accepted the moment to breathe.
Yeah, and to realize the report card you're looking at isn't the one that you think other people are giving you.
You're grading
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
It's weird. It's like a tree that grows back into itself. Is I want to be what I think you want me to be.
Yeah.
And so then when I fail, in my mind I failed you, but I failed whatever I projected you to do.
Exactly.
It's all messy.
It's like, oh, I don't think you failed.
It's
Yeah.
messy up here.
That's great.
Yeah. So then to realize in this time, even if you're going to look at, you redefine success. It's not what I'm going to say other people are saying about me. No, it's who God is and who I am in relationship with God. I am son. I am prince. I am heir. Those things are foundational.
You're a
They
friend.
do not change.
Yeah.
I'm a friend. Yeah. We palling around. But those things do not change despite what things I might tick off on my list.
Yeah. Well, hey guys, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much. I want to show you guys a couple resources real quick here. These are 3 wonderful books. First one is Road Back to You by Ian Morgan Cron.
Yeah.
Highly recommend this one. This is a great beginner's book.
Yeah.
He doesn't get into a lot of the details on it, but it gives you a great overview. You can buy these on Amazon. He's got a great podcast called Typology, which I absolutely love. It's been an incredible tool for me. Second one is a book by Chris Hewitt's called The Sacred Enneagram. A little bit deeper, can be a little confusing, which is why I would say read that one first. But he does a great job getting into the nuances of the Enneagram, particularly from a spiritual perspective. And this is a phenomenal book. This is one of my all-time favorites by Marilyn Vansel, Self to Lose, Self-Defined. If you're a Christian or a believer, she not only helps you see the biblical side of the Enneagram and how Scripture does support, Scripture affirms what the Enneagram teaches, but also does a phenomenal job of helping us see grace in the midst of our numbers and kind of getting to who God has called us to be. And then the last one is Susan Stable, The Path Between Us, which is a phenomenal book about relationship. I wish I had the book in front of me. Beth McCord has another one that's on relationship. But this is for people that are in romantic relationships and can really help understand each other. I hope you'll tune in next week. We're going to be interviewing our Z Kids program team. And wonderful. It's going to be a wonderful time to talk with them. Thank you so much for tuning in. And remember, the goal of the Enneagram is to help you get back to who God intended you to be. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I so appreciate you being with us
Yeah, it was
today.
really good
having us.
And,
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, and Stacy, thank you for doing your part back there. She was clicking a lot of buttons and doing multiple things at the same time. And for those of you who had questions, I am so sorry if we didn't get to everybody's question. Thanks for tuning in. This will be available longer. It'll be on Facebook Live, and you can continue to watch it. I hope you'll share it. Tune with us next week, 10:30 on Fridays. Every day Enneagram, and right now we're talking about Enneagram and Crisis. Have a wonderful day.